It started on a stormy morning when the wind howled like a wounded animal, and the skies broke open over the rolling hills of Devonshire. Farmer Elias Reed, a quiet man in his late 50s with sun-worn hands and a heart worn just as rough, was tending his fence line after it had taken a beating overnight. He was used to the solitude, used to the silence that came after losing his wife 3 winters ago. But that morning, something broke the silence. A sound. Faint. High-pitched. Somewhere between a cry and a whimper. Elias stopped mid-step. At first, he thought it was the wind teasing his ears. But then he heard it again, urgent, desperate. He followed the noise, boots squelching in the muddy grass, until he reached a thicket near the far edge of his land. There, curled beneath a bush, was the smallest creature he'd seen in years, a baby fox. Barely breathing. Its fur soaked and matted, its tiny body trembling violently. Its eyes, half open, locked with his for just a second. A second that somehow held a question, a plea, and a quiet kind of trust. He could have left it. Nature was cruel like that. Farmers were taught not to interfere with wild things. But Elias knelt beside the kit and gently scooped it into his arms, wrapping it in his flannel and whispering, "All right, then. Let's get you warm." He brought it into the old barn where his wife used to keep her rescued animals. Blankets, a space heater, some powdered goat milk from a supply she'd left behind. He didn't know if it would be enough. But he tried. Day by day, the kit grew stronger. Elias named him Rust, after the reddish dusting on his fur. He didn't let himself grow attached, at least, that's what he told himself. But when Rust nuzzled into his palm for warmth or followed his movements with those bright eyes, a part of Elias, one he thought had died with his wife, began to stir again. He kept the little fox for 3 weeks. Until one sunny morning, Elias opened the barn door and found Rust waiting there, almost expectantly. As if he knew it was time. Elias crouched down, looked into those now alert eyes, and whispered, "Go on, then. You're strong enough now." Rust hesitated, then turned, and padded into the trees. Elias stood there for a long while, heart oddly heavy. Life on the farm returned to normal, though it felt quieter than before. He missed the tiny paws scrambling across hay, the little yips during feeding. But he told himself it was the right thing. Wild things belong to the wild. Weeks passed. Then, one crisp morning near dawn, Elias was pouring feed into the chicken coop when he heard a rustle at the edge of the woods. He glanced up, and froze. It was Rust. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, limping slightly but walking tall, was a girl, no older than 10, wrapped in a worn coat 2 sizes too big, her face smudged and her hair tangled. Her eyes wide and scared. Elias approached slowly. The girl took a step back, but Rust turned to her and yipped softly, circling her feet, nudging her forward. It turned out she'd been lost. Her name was Sophie. She'd wandered away from a campsite with her parents during a hike and gotten turned around. Days had passed. She'd been cold, scared, and hungry, until a fox found her. "He kept coming back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He brought me berries, and once, even a piece of bread. Then this morning, he led me here." Elias stood there, utterly speechless, heart thundering in his chest. That tiny life he'd saved had somehow turned around and saved another. The full circle of kindness, alive and breathing right in front of him. The authorities were called, and Sophie's family, frantic and crying, came within the hour. There were embraces, tears, and more than one odd glance at the red-furred creature now perched calmly near Elias' boots. As they drove away, Sophie turned around and waved from the window. "Thank you," she mouthed, eyes shining. Rust stayed a moment longer, watching the truck disappear down the country road. Then he looked up at Elias. They stood like that, man and fox, in a moment heavy with something unspoken. Gratitude. Memory. Understanding. Then Rust turned and disappeared into the trees once more. Elias never saw him again. But he didn't need to. He knew that somewhere out there was a little fox with a brave heart and a soul full of something deeper than instinct, something Elias had almost forgotten existed. He went back to the barn that evening and opened the door, just a little, as if waiting for the wind to carry back another soul that needed saving. Because Elias had learned that no act of kindness, no matter how small or silent, ever truly goes unnoticed. And sometimes, the life you save, ends up saving yours too.